Most beginners don't fail because of lack of effort. They fail because they're following a process that was never complete to begin with. At first, everything feels clear. You pick a project, maybe something simple, a table, a shelf, a small bench. You find a plan that looks clean, maybe even professional. There are pictures, some measurements, maybe even a materials list. So you assume you are ready. And that's where the first mistake quietly happens. Because beginners tend to believe that if a plan looks finished, it must be buildable. But looking complete and being complete are two very different things. You start cutting, the first few steps go fine. It feels like progress, then somewhere in the middle, usually not at the beginning, something stops making sense. A measurement doesn't match. A step skips ahead. A diagram shows what the final piece should look like, but not how to actually get there. So you pause, you go back, you double check. And this is where most beginners make their second mistake. They assume the problem is them. They think they misread something, or missed a detail, or just don't have enough experience yet. So they try to figure it out. They adjust measurements. They improvise steps. They make small guesses that feel reasonable in the moment. And sometimes it works partially. But more often, those small guesses compound. A tiny misalignment becomes a joint that won't close. A slightly wrong cut becomes a piece that doesn't fit. And suddenly, you're not following a plan anymore. You're troubleshooting a problem that shouldn't exist. What makes this frustrating is that beginners are usually doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're being careful. They're following instructions. They're taking their time. But the structure they're relying on is flawed. And that leads to the third mistake, starting projects without a clear path to the finish line. Not because beginners are careless, but because most plans don't actually guide you all the way through. They show you what to build. They don't show you how to think through the build. There's a big difference. It's like being handed a picture of a finished puzzle without knowing how the pieces connect. You can see the outcome, but the process is missing. So projects stall. Not at the start, but halfway through, when decisions become less obvious and the plan stops supporting you. That's why so many beginner projects end up sitting in garages half finished. Not because people quit, but because the path forward becomes unclear. And over time, that creates a pattern. You start associating woodworking with uncertainty, with wasted materials, with second guessing, with projects that take longer than they should. Eventually, even starting feels heavier than it should. But here's the part that usually doesn't get the likelier. The real issue isn't skill. It's structure. When the structure is clear, when every step connects, every measurement aligns, and every stage of the build has been thought through, Ling get complete alone. Min ordningsträd väl upp till min värld. Reason is Ario so killed. They gain confidence. Because instead of guessing, they're executing, and instead of troubleshooting, they're progressing. That's the turning point most people never experience early on. They think improvement comes from more practice alone. But in reality, clarity changes everything. When you remove the need to interpret, you free up your attention to actually learn. You start noticing why pieces fit, why steps happen in a certain order, why small details matter. And that's when woodworking starts to feel less like trial and error and more like a process you can rely on. From there, progress becomes predictable. Not perfect, but consistent. You waste less material. You spend less time stuck. You finish more projects. And maybe more importantly, you start enjoying the process again. Not because it got easier, but because it finally makes sense. If you want to go deeper into this, there's a structured breakdown in the description that walks through what complete plans actually include and how to recognize them before you start. And if this kind of clarity helps you think differently about your projects, you can subscribe for more content like this. Because once you understand the structure behind the process, everything you build from that point forward starts to change.